Welcome back, everyone, to the 21st Century Man podcast.
It's great to be here.
Today, we're diving deep into a really important chapter.
Yeah.
Chapter 2 of the 21st Century Man.
Very important.
Smart ways to reduce your health risks. And, we always say we want to give you the most important information from each chapter so you can really take control of your health and well-being. And I got to say, this chapter starts out with a pretty interesting, almost a paradox.
It does. It's a really attention-grabbing opening. The authors, Dr. Judson, Brandeis, and Michael Abassian, they start by pointing out that, we live dramatically longer than men did, even just 150 years ago. The average lifespan back then was only 35 years.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing to think about the progress we've made in medicine and public health.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And yet, for the first time in that entire period, longevity for American men is now declining.
Right.
And particularly in middle age. It's
Sure.
not just a little blip, it's a trend. And the authors highlight this as a serious call to action.
It is. It's a wake-up call. And what I appreciate is that they immediately emphasize the importance of knowledge, right? They say, understanding your risks is the first step. It might seem obvious, but they point out how many guys are just unaware of the dangers of, say, a fast food diet.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just not on their radar.
Yeah.
So this chapter is really about empowering men with that knowledge.
Okay, so we've got the problem, but thankfully there are solutions, right?
Absolutely.
This chapter is full of practical steps that we can take, and that's what we're going to get into today.
That's right. We're going to break down those strategies, give you the tools to make a difference.
So let's start with where we can have the biggest impact. The authors focus on heart disease and cancer.
Right. The big two.
Combined, these two account for nearly half.
A staggering 46% of all male deaths. So logically, if we can address these two areas, we can really move the needle on men's health.
That's a huge point. And here's something that I found really interesting, is that the things that contribute to heart disease and cancer, they're not completely separate.
Right. There's a lot of overlap.
There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
And the book says that by adopting a healthy diet, staying active, and avoiding tobacco, you can cut your risks by about half.
It's incredible. With a few key lifestyle changes, you can dramatically reduce your chances of developing these diseases.
It's amazing. Okay, let's dig into heart disease a little bit. The chapter makes a strong case that it's largely preventable.
Absolutely. And they back it up with research. They cite studies showing that modifiable risk factors, the things we can control, have a huge impact on our heart health.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, for one, quitting smoking. There was a major NIH-funded study that showed that quitting smoking can reduce your risk of heart disease by about 40% within 5 years.
Wow.
So almost cutting your risk in half.
That's huge.
If you're a smoker, that's a pretty powerful statistic.
It is. What about exercise? A lot of guys might be thinking, well, I wasn't very active in my 20s and 30s. Is it even worth starting now?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
The chapter emphasizes that exercise in your 40s is critical, regardless of your past activity levels. Starting in middle age still leads to major decreases in heart disease risk.
So it's never too late to start.
Never too late. And what's fascinating is that exercise has a similar protective effect against cancer.
Really? Even if you start later in life?
Even if you start later in life. So the benefits are far-reaching.
That's really good to know. Now, the chapter also defines what we mean by heart disease. It explains that cardiovascular disease is a broad term that includes things like heart attack, they use the medical term, myocardial infarction,
Right.
which is when blood flow to a part of the heart is blocked.
Right. Heart attack.
And also aneurysms, which are bulges in blood vessel walls.
Yeah.
Stroke, which is when blood supply to the brain is interrupted, and heart failure, where the heart can't pump blood effectively.
So it's a whole range of serious conditions that fall under that umbrella of cardiovascular disease.
And the numbers are pretty sobering. The book points out that heart disease is responsible for 1 in 4 male deaths.
Yeah.
In 2017 alone, it caused 350,000 deaths in the U.S. That's a significant impact on men and their families.
It is. And what's really concerning is that half of the men who die from coronary heart disease, that's the most common type, they have no prior warning signs.
So they don't even know they're at risk.
Exactly. That's why regular checkups and cardiovascular risk assessment are so important.
It's about being proactive.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to cancer risks. The chapter explains that cancer is a leading cause of death for men from 40 to 80 and beyond.
It's a huge problem. About 900,000 men are diagnosed with cancer each year, and around 320,000 die from it.
That's a lot of people. And what's the lifetime risk for men?
Over 40%.
Hmm.
So almost 1 in 2 men will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lives.
Wow. And how does that risk change as we age?
Well, it increases pretty dramatically. From birth to 50, it's just over 3%. But in your 50s, it doubles to 6%. Then in your 60s, it's 13%. And for men 70 and over, it jumps to about 32%.
So it really goes up as we get older.
It does. And the most common cancers in men are lung, prostate, and digestive tract cancers, which are all heavily influenced by lifestyle choices like smoking and diet.
Again, we see that overlap with heart disease risk factors.
Exactly.
But specifically on prostate cancer, the chapter recommends tracking your PSA levels after age 50.
Right. PSA stands for prostate-specific antigen. It's a blood test that can help detect prostate cancer early, even before you have any symptoms.
So early detection is key.
Absolutely. And there is some good news. Overall, death rates from cancer in men have been declining since the early 1990s.
That's encouraging.
It is, and they attribute that to a combination of things: changes in lifestyle, better screening, and more effective treatments.
So we're making progress. But what are the key things that make a difference when it comes to reducing cancer risk?
Well, the chapter emphasizes knowing your risk factors, especially looking at your family history for any patterns.
Yeah.
And then it comes back to those healthy habits: stopping smoking, maintaining a healthy weight, eating a nutritious diet, and getting regular physical activity.
Those are the big ones.
They are. And here's an interesting point. The book notes that men who were active when they were young, but then stopped exercising, have worse health outcomes than those who start exercising later in life and stick with it.
So it's really about consistency.
It is. It's about making those healthy habits a part of your life for the long haul.
Now, the chapter also talks about chronic illness in general,
Right.
and it highlights the fact that the U.S. population is aging. By 2030, all baby boomers will be over 65.
That's a big shift.
And that means more chronic diseases.
Yeah.
Beyond heart disease and cancer, we're seeing increases in things like chronic respiratory diseases, liver disease, and diabetes.
That's a growing concern.
But the authors are very clear that we have the power to make changes.
Absolutely. They emphasize that we can influence our health outcomes.
That's an important message. Now, they also delve into the impact of diabetes on men's sexual vitality, which is something that often gets overlooked.
Right. It's a sensitive topic, but it's important to address.
Diabetes directly accounts for over 46,000 male deaths annually.
And men make up about 65% of type 1 diabetes cases.
And type 2 diabetes, which is often linked to lifestyle factors, becomes more prevalent with age. About 10% of men aged 45 to 54 have it, 20% between 55 and 64, and 23% for men 65 and older.
So it's definitely something to be aware of as we age. And the chapter points out that diabetes and prediabetes can have negative effects on men's quality of life, including low testosterone, decreased sex drive, erectile dysfunction, and impotence.
So it's not just about physical health, it's about overall well-being.
Exactly.
Now, the book shifts to a more proactive approach, emphasizing the importance of taking control of our health. We can't change our past, but we can make choices today that will impact our future. And they reiterate the key areas where we can have the biggest impact on heart disease: quitting tobacco, focusing on nutrition, becoming physically active, and moderating alcohol intake.
Those are the cornerstones of a healthy lifestyle.
To illustrate the importance of early detection, they compare the 5-year survival rates for different cancers. For example, prostate cancer has a survival rate of about 98%, while pancreatic cancer is just over 9%.
That's a stark difference.
It really shows the importance of catching things early.
It does.
And the chapter ends with a direct message. Guys, check in with your doctor.
It's so important.
They point out that men are less likely to utilize primary care services.
Maybe it's a cultural thing, that whole idea of men being self-reliant.
Yeah.
But the authors urge us to overcome that and prioritize our health. They say that lifestyle changes can reduce stroke risk by 80%. And blood tests can screen for cancers before symptoms even appear.
So screening can save lives.
Absolutely.
And they encourage us to schedule that overdue appointment with our doctor.
You owe it to yourself.
To recap the key takeaways from this chapter.
Sure.
The leading causes of death for men aged 40-80 are heart disease and cancer. Smoking is a major risk factor for virtually all types of cancer, including lung, prostate, and colorectal.
Right.
A healthy diet with plenty of fruits and vegetables is essential. And moderate to vigorous physical activity should be a regular part of our lives.
And they also highlight the importance of access to quality health insurance.
So, this chapter of the 21st Century Man gives us a really powerful overview of the key health risks facing men today, and more importantly, what we can do about it.
It's a call to action.
We hope this deep dive has been helpful and motivating. We highly encourage you to read The 21st Century Man in its entirety. It's an incredibly valuable resource for any man who wants to take control of his health.
It's a great book.
And join us next time for our exploration of Chapter 3,
Yeah,
What Women Need to Know About Men's Health.
looking forward to it.
Until then, take good care of yourselves.
Take care.
And we'll see you next time.
See ya.